Colt has a question regarding 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 through 25. He says, Elisha and the two bears, what's the context of this story?
Let me go through and get there. 2 Kings 2. Let me read it, Colt, so everybody knows what's going on in the passage. This is one of those that Elisha gets attacked on. It is right after Elijah is taken up into heaven. Elisha is Elijah's protege. In other words, he's taken over his ministry. And Elisha had asked for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. And Elijah said, "Well, you can have that if you see me. If you see me taken by God." And so that's exactly what happened. And in chapter 2, in verse 13, it says, "He also took up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and went back and stood by the bank of the Jordan. Then he took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water and said, 'Where's the God of Elijah?' And when he had also struck the water, it was divided this way and that, and Elisha crossed over. Now when the sons of the prophets who were from Jericho saw him, they said, 'The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha.' And they came to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. Then they said to him, 'Look now, there are 50 strong men with your servants.' And they go through and do this whole thing. And then the passage, right at the end of the passage, it says in verse 23, "He went up from there to Bethel, and as he was going up the road, some youths came from the city and mocked him and said to him, 'Go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head.' So he turned around and looked at them and pronounced a curse on them in the name of the Lord. And 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the youths. And then he went from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria." He's in northern Israel, and in this passage right here in Bethel. And Bethel was a place of paganism. And these kids knew that Elisha was a follower of Elijah, who was famous for being anti-Ahab and anti-Baal and anti-paganism. The word that's used for youths there is a word that basically can be used for a kid that's all the way up to 30, basically. And so you're not necessarily talking about 10-year-olds or something, or 7-year-olds. You're talking about guys who are most likely older than that. The same word is used for the guys who went with Abraham when he took Isaac to be sacrificed. There were 2 young men. It's a word that means young men. And so these are young men that are mocking the prophet of God, and specifically mocking the fact that apparently he didn't have any hair on his head. And so I think that they should have been mauled by 2 female bears. And if you're listening on the radio, it's because I lost my hair long ago. So that's what I'm talking about. In any case, they're not just mocking Elisha; they're mocking the God of Elisha. They're mocking him because he's lost Elijah, and they're mocking him because he's not a follower of Baal. And again, Bethel was known for Baal worship at that time. So, yeah, that's the context.
Okay. So you didn't, and I don't know if this is true or not, but you point that out because weren't you doing a Bible study on the radio years and years ago, and you're making bald jokes, and then someone came in because they didn't know who you were?
No, they called on the phone. And so, I make fun of myself all the time. And so, I'll do bald jokes or whatever. And so there was this guy who he left a phone message on our answering machine, and he was a trucker, and he was driving through Idaho, and he heard my Bible program. I'm making fun of bald guys. And he got all ticked off, left this message saying, "You probably have a full head of hair," and blah blah blah. And rah rah rah. He's just all mad. And I'm listening to this thing. I'm like, "Oh, please leave a phone number." And he didn't. He just hung up. So That guy, needless to say, probably never listened to my Bible study again. He doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
Judge not that ye be not judged, for by what measure you...
There you go.
Yeah.
That's funny.